And joining us this week is our good friend Karl Moore, an associate professor at the Desautels Faculty of Management, one of the world's top international schools of business at McGill University in Montreal. It is so good to see you again.
Tom, it's been a few years. It's good to be back, I must say.
It has been a few years. This is the first time we've been able to get together since the pandemic. Many of our viewers know you as a columnist for the Globe and Mail, and for a number of years you have hosted the CEO series on CJAD Radio in Montreal, our friends.
Well, it's across Canada now.
And all across,
recently
right?
Across Canada, so we're quite delighted by that.
Fantastic. Sure. And you interview top business and political leaders, movers and shakers from across Canada and around the world, really. You've also written a number of books, latest out just within the past week on a topic you've touched on before, the often talked about generational divide between boomers and millennials and Gen Zers. And you're focusing on that. It's really changing the workplace.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I've been asking CEOs for the last few years, as I've been working on the book, is Generation Z different? And a CEO of any size company would have their chief human resource officer come to them and say, Madam, there really are different. And if you look at Bombardier, 15,000 people, or CGI, about 70,000 people, they would have thousands of Gen Zs. So one of your questions is, how do I deal effectively with them? So it's very top of mind, and when you ask a CEO of a reasonable sized company, I mean, if it's just you and your dog, that's one thing, you know, as a startup, and they would tend to be younger people. It is something what we're wrestling with. So what I'm arguing in the book, Tom, is this, in one sentence. People over 45 with a degree were taught a modern worldview. People under 35 with a degree were taught a postmodern worldview, comma, therefore must be managed differently. Second sentence, and this book has 5 short chapters on how to do that on a practical level.
So you offer tools on how to do that.
It's part of like, you want to get down to, like, postmodern versus modern thought is about big philosophical topics like truth. Who has truth? What is truth? How much truth is there? It's things like hierarchy. So these are philosophical comments, ideas that go back. So one of the famous lines in the New Testament, Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, is saying to Jesus, truth. What is truth? So it's a question that the Romans were asking and the Greeks asked back in the day. And there's less truth than there used to be. So when I was a kid, there was this much truth. Some of it was wrong, that some races are inferior. So that has gone away, thankfully. But there's less truth than there used to be. There's still some truth. Respect your elders, which I see less of. But, you know, it's something where you should be nice to older people. So I think the truth is, on the metro, if a very expectant woman or an elderly person gets on with 2 canes, you get up and give them your seat. This is just something that you should do, and no one's going to argue with. So, but there's less truth than there used to be, and who has truth? So one of the points is young people honestly believe their story is as good as yours. And part of that is saying, in a turbulent world, and we are in a turbulent world, you need to change your strategies more quickly to be in line with the outside world. So you look at the Mintzberg versus Porter view of strategy. So Henry Mintzberg's at McGill and Porter at Harvard. We like Porter. We gave him an honorary doctorate about 5 years ago. I spent an hour with him, and it was great to do that. It's saying is that in a world of change, older people have got to recognize that they're outdated in some of their thinking. So I interviewed General Martin Dempsey, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, taught with him at Duke, and he was, when President was Obama, he was the chairman. And one of the most interesting things he said in his office in the Pentagon was, generals fight the battles of their youth. So he was a pup lieutenant out of West Point and had a tank in the Cold War in Germany. He was taught leadership by being a young leader, a lieutenant, but he learned from leadership from the majors and generals who had been young men and women in Vietnam, where small men in black pajamas jump out of the jungle, shoot you, and go into tunnels. He was in the Cold War, then he became a general at Desert Storm, and he said much of the lessons he learned from Vietnam vets and from his own time was irrelevant for Desert Storm. So the idea is saying is that we fight the battles of our youth. The advantage of Bowen here, one of my undergrad students, is 20 years ago he was 1 year old. He doesn't remember it, and he doesn't have to throw away lessons yet. But as you get older, over 45 and 50, you got to say, I'm wrong more than I used to be because the world's changed more than it used to be. So one interesting thing came out of that is that I set up a couple weeks ago my woke council for the year. So I used to call it politically correct, but it's kind of evolved to woke. And I realize in the US, woke is a loaded word.
It can be, yes.
What I mean by it is being respectful of people we didn't respect enough in the past. So people of color, women, and so on. And when you take it from that viewpoint, most people agree that's fine. And it goes on a lot of other things. But what I ask them to do is say, when I say something dated or inappropriate, let me know. And so they do, and they travel with me. One's a producer of my radio show and so on. And and I don't say things where they have to stop the meeting and say that's totally wrong. Nothing that bad, but it's just saying you just don't say that anymore. Or if you say this, Indigenous people might take it inappropriately, and you go, that's a good point. And I want to show respect for those people, so I'll no longer say that. So they keep me up to date. And what I argue for people that are in management, if you're over 40. I guess we didn't trust people over 30 back in the day, but if you're over 40, you need to be reverse mentored by Gen Zs. And what that means is that when I say to my students, 30% of the time you're reverse mentoring, you're teaching me. Now I have a couple older mentors, this thought does not generally occur to them, that they should ask my advice. But it's something where 30% of the time you're teaching me, like my counsel that advises me on my use of languages and things I'm doing. Now, I do remind my students that 70% of the time I'm mentoring you, and don't forget that. So it's a two-way street, but what is new is that I'm going to learn a lot from young people because I want to be up to date. And language is important because people get microaggressions and things like that, and took a course, 2-hour course at McGill as faculty and staff to do on microaggressions, and there's a certain silliness, but a lot of it just makes sense. That one thing I've learned is that you don't call people elderly who are below 70. Now we're older and wiser, but elderly is for people with white hair and with canes and even them, I wouldn't call them elderly, I'd say you're older, you have more life experience. So it's something where I teach young people, don't call people elderly, and don't even call them old, call them older, more life experience. That's kind of a microaggression if you use some of those terms. And you and I go, oh, that's really actually quite nice young people to do that. So there's an evolution of we're more learning from young people and they have much to teach us. When you get a new phone, you probably, I would give it to my son or daughter and they don't read the instruction manual. They just seem to know, and I'll download the instruction manual, you don't get it anymore, and I'll learn a couple features and point out and they'll be very happy that I learned this. So there's just an evolution of hierarchy, truth, and knowledge, and it's more nuanced than it was when we were young. See, young people don't want to work for you if you don't listen to them. You're a jerk if you don't listen. So it's something where you'll be a better leader, they're more apt to work for you and stay with you, and you're going to get better strategy from it. So strategy in a turbulent world, you want to talk to the frontline troops because they're actually out dealing with real live customers. And what they do is that often they solve problems by, hey, a customer had this problem, so we went to marketing, we went to sales, went to service, we went to the installers, and together we solve a problem. So seniors management's job is not to have the new strategies necessary, but spot good ones when they emerge from a turbulent world. And they're the ones that provide the resource and go to the board and get approval and take it forward because they have the authority to do that. But a lot of those ideas are going to come from listening to people that are actually talking and discussing things with customers, suppliers, and people like that.